June Holloway slid a folded note onto my desk at 10:17 a.m. I knew the exact time because 10 years ago, I had watched the classroom clock while deciding whether to open it. I hadn't. I had heard someone behind me whisper, "No way. Holloway wrote Miles a love note?" A few people laughed. Someone made a kissing sound. I had been 17, desperate not to look embarrassed, and stupid enough to care more about 30 seconds of attention than the girl standing beside my desk. So I had crushed the note in my fist and dropped it into the trash without reading a single word. 10 years later, I would still remember June's face when she saw me do it. Not angry. Not heartbroken in some dramatic movie way. She had simply gone still, tucked her notebook against her chest, and walked back to her seat. That was the moment I had just returned to. June was standing beside me again. The note was still under my hand, and my 17-year-old fingers were not yet wrapped around it. I stared at the paper so long that June lifted one eyebrow. She couldn't ask what was wrong aloud. A childhood injury had left her unable to speak above a faint breath, so at school she used American Sign Language with people who knew it, her phone with people who didn't, and handwritten notes when she wanted something to feel deliberate. I barely knew ASL then. I knew enough now to recognize the expression on her face. "Well?" Behind me, somebody whispered, "Open it, Rowan." A second voice laughed. Maybe the valedictorian finally found a subject she can't get 100 on. 10 years ago, that joke had been enough to make me throw the note away. This time, I turned around. "Do you guys have nothing better to do?" The laughter stopped. Not because I sounded intimidating. I didn't. Because that answer had never come from me before. When I faced June again, she was watching me carefully. I unfolded the paper. Her handwriting was neat, narrow, almost architectural. "I know you're dropping woodshop next semester. Don't. Meet me in room 214 after school. I need you to build something with me. Also, your chair prototype was ugly, but the joint was clever." I read the last line twice. Then I laughed. June's eyes widened slightly. "You wrote that my chair was ugly?" She took the pen clipped to my notebook, wrote one word beneath her message, and pushed the paper back. "Very." For the first time in 10 years, I remembered exactly why June Holloway had always fascinated me. She was the top-ranked student at Briarwood High, but she had never behaved like someone who needed people impressed by her. Teachers displayed her architecture sketches in the design hallway. Guidance counselors used her grades when talking about competitive colleges. She hated all of that attention and became visibly irritated whenever someone called her inspiring for doing ordinary things while unable to speak. What I had forgotten was that she was funny. Mean, occasionally. But funny. The bell rang, and chairs scraped back around us. June reached for the note. I covered it with my hand. "I'm keeping this." She paused, then signed slowly, making sure I could follow. "Why?" I knew only enough ASL at 17 to understand that one. Because apparently I need reminders not to make stupid decisions. She narrowed her eyes, clearly deciding whether I was joking. Then she took her phone out and typed. "Room 214, 3:20, if you're late, I'm leaving." I typed back before she could put the phone away. "I'll be there." June read it, nodded once, and left. I stayed in my seat. My heartbeat was pounding hard enough to feel ridiculous. Because the note had already changed something I thought I understood about my first life. For years, I had assumed June gave me a confession that day. I had imagined some version of "I like you" sitting unread in a trash can while I went on to live a life built almost entirely around safe choices. I had been wrong. She had asked me to build something, and I had never even known what. That question followed me into lunch. So did another one. How had June known I planned to drop woodshop? Nobody at school knew yet. My father did. My guidance counselor did. I had decided the night before. Woodworking was the one class I genuinely loved, which was exactly why 17-year-old me thought I had to quit it. My father had called it a hobby. He wasn't cruel about it. That almost made things worse. He had simply laid out the practical version of my future: advanced economics, business school, finance, a stable career. He had spent 20 years building a successful accounting firm and believed he was giving me the shortest route to a secure life. The first time around, I had followed it. At 30, I worked on the 34th floor of a glass office tower approving financial models for acquisitions I didn't care about. I made more money than 17-year-old me would have known what to do with. I also kept a woodworking account bookmarked on my phone and watched strangers build tables during lunch breaks. That was as close as I had come to the life I wanted. This time, the future had reached backward and put a folded piece of paper under my hand. At 3:17, I was already outside room 214. The room had once been used for drafting classes. Now it mostly stored old desks, broken shelves, and rolled architectural plans. June was inside measuring the far wall. She looked at the clock, then at me. I held up 3 fingers. 3 minutes early. She typed on her phone. Acceptable. High praise. She ignored that and pointed toward a large drawing taped to the wall. I stepped closer. It was a full floor plan, not a class assignment. A real proposal. The old room transformed into a flexible senior commons, built-in window benches, modular tables, quiet study corners, low shelving, pin-up surfaces, storage hidden inside seating. It was beautiful. It was also difficult. You designed this? June nodded. At the bottom of the plan was a title. Senior Legacy Room Proposal. I remembered the program now. Briarwood planned to renovate one unused room before graduation. Students could submit proposals, and the selected design would actually be built over spring semester. In my first life, the finished room had opened near graduation. I remembered walking through it once. I remembered thinking the design was good. I did not remember June's name anywhere. She handed me another sheet. This one contained detailed construction drawings. I studied the curved shelving unit along the west wall. Then I spotted the problem. The radius is wrong. June folded her arms. I pointed. If you build this exactly as drawn, the outer panel twists. You need another support here, and your depth changes by about ½ an inch near the center. Her eyes sharpened. Most people hated being corrected. June reached for her pencil. She wrote directly on the drawing. Show me. Something tightened in my chest. That was it. That was the thing I had forgotten. June never wanted politeness when accuracy would help more. I took the pencil and sketched a revised support. If we laminate thinner strips instead of forcing one thick board, you can keep the curve. It'll take longer, but it won't fight the grain. June watched my hand, then looked from the drawing to me. She signed something too fast for me to follow. Sorry. I only got wood. Her mouth curved slightly. She typed. You understand wood better than you understand sign language. Unfortunately. Fixable. I looked at that word, then at her. Which one? June's smile grew. She typed. Both. I laughed. Then I noticed a folder on the desk with a school letter clipped to it. At the top, Legacy Room Selection Committee, Presentation Requirements. A line had been highlighted. Each proposal must be presented orally by the designated student lead. I looked at June. She had already gone still. You're the lead. She nodded. And they require an oral presentation. Another nod. That's ridiculous. June's expression changed instantly. She took her phone and typed hard enough that I heard her nails against the screen. Don't do that. I frowned. Do what? Decide I'm helpless before asking what I want. That shut me up. 10 years of adult experience, and she corrected me in 6 seconds. You're right. Her expression softened slightly. What do you want? This time, she didn't type immediately. She opened the committee folder and showed me another page. The faculty advisor had written a suggestion in the margin. Consider assigning a verbal co-presenter to improve judging clarity. Underneath, in June's handwriting. No. I looked at her. You want to present it yourself? She nodded. Then what do you need me for? June turned back to the construction drawings. She tapped the curved shelving, then the window bench, then a complicated folding table system. Finally she wrote, They keep telling me the design is beautiful but unrealistic. I need someone who can prove it can exist. I read the sentence slowly. Not someone to speak for her. Not someone to rescue her. Someone who could build beside her. My father's voice came back to me from the night before. Woodshop won't help you get where you're going. Then I looked at June's drawing. For the first time, I wondered whether the real problem had always been that I was going toward the wrong place. I was going to drop woodshop tomorrow. June nodded. How did you know? She hesitated, then opened the bottom drawer of the drafting table. Inside was a small wooden model. My chair. The ugly one. I had made it 6 weeks earlier for a class exercise. It was lopsided, overbuilt, and embarrassing enough that I had left it beside the scrap bin after grading. June had kept it. Not the whole chair. A miniature joint sample I'd made while experimenting with the back support. She handed it to me. Then typed. You threw this away too. I stared at the little piece of walnut. She continued. Mr. Alvarez said you were quitting next semester. He sounded disappointed. Our woodshop teacher. Of course. I turned the joint over in my hand. Why did you keep this? June considered the question. Then she typed. Because your chair was ugly. The joint wasn't. I laughed again, but she wasn't finished. A second message appeared. People keep telling me what parts of my design are impossible. You were the first person I saw make something difficult work without pretending it was easy. There it was. Not a love confession. Something more dangerous. Trust. I put the wooden joint beside her drawing. What's the deadline? June pointed at the calendar. 3 weeks. I should have said no. My economics schedule was already packed. My father expected me to switch classes. The legacy room would take hours every week, and I had no idea whether changing this one decision would wreck every useful thing I remembered about the next 10 years. Then again, I already knew exactly what happened when I played safe. I picked up the construction plan. I'll stay in woodshop. June stared at me. And I'll build the prototype with you. She didn't smile immediately. Instead, she took out the original folded note, which I had placed on the table, and pointed to the bottom edge. There's more? June nodded. I unfolded one last crease I hadn't noticed. A final line appeared. If you say yes, don't do it because you feel sorry for me. I already have enough people doing that. I looked up. June was watching me carefully. That was the real test. Not whether I believed her design could win. Whether I could work with her without turning her into someone I needed to save. I took her pencil and wrote beneath the sentence. Good. I'm terrible at pity. Your measurements still need work. June read it. Then she laughed without sound, shoulders shaking, eyes bright. And for the first time since waking up 10 years in the past, I stopped thinking about everything I could change. I started thinking about what we could build. By Monday, everyone knew I had changed my schedule. That was not because I announced it. It was because Mr. Alvarez announced it for me. He slapped the updated woodshop roster onto the bulletin board before first period, and there was my name under advanced fabrication, right where it had been before I decided to drop the class. My father had not seen the change yet. June had. She stood beside the board with her backpack over one shoulder, read my name, then looked at me. I held up my hands. Don't look so surprised. She signed slowly enough for me to catch most of it. I expected you to change your mind overnight. I did that once already. Her eyebrows lifted. I realized how strange that sounded. I mean about dropping the class. She studied me for a second, then typed. You say things like someone who already regrets being old. I almost laughed too loudly. 17 is exhausting. June gave me a flat look and walked toward room 214. I followed. The legacy room proposal had become our daily routine in less than a week. June arrived with drawings. I arrived with questions. She designed something elegant, and I told her which part would collapse, twist, jam, or cost twice what she estimated. Then she fixed it. She never thanked me for agreeing with her. She thanked me for disagreeing well. I liked that more than I wanted to admit. The first prototype was the curved shelving unit. June's original design looked effortless on paper, a low sweep of shelves wrapping around one corner, with space for books, bags, plants, and student projects. Building it was another matter. I cut 3 test strips and ruined 2. June watched the second one split. She typed. That sounded expensive. It was scrap. That sounded defensive. I'm beginning to dislike how well you communicate without speaking. She smiled. Then she drew a different curve directly onto a plywood offcut. I stared at it. You changed the radius. She nodded. It's less dramatic. Another nod. You hate that. This time she nodded very enthusiastically. I laughed. Good. Then we're compromising. She wrote on the board. Compromise is what people call it when my first idea survives badly. You're going to be fun in an architecture office. She paused. The smile disappeared. I immediately knew I had touched something real. You are applying for architecture, right? June looked at the floor. Then she nodded. That surprised me more than it should have. In my first life, I remembered hearing that June went somewhere prestigious after graduation, but I had never cared enough to remember where. By then I was already busy following my own carefully approved path. What schools? She pulled her phone out, typed 3 names, and showed me. All of them were difficult. Very difficult. I whistled softly. You're aiming high. June typed. I'm valedictorian. People become concerned if I aim normally. I smiled, but she wasn't smiling back. What? She hesitated. Then typed. They want me to apply to schools with stronger general rankings instead. Who's they? Counselor. My aunt. Half the teachers who think architecture is too uncertain. I leaned against the workbench. That sounded painfully familiar. Do you want architecture? June nodded immediately. No hesitation. Then why are you listening to them? She looked at me like I had asked a stupid question. Then she typed. Because people who care about you can still be wrong in very convincing ways. That landed harder than she knew. My father's voice came back instantly. Stable. Practical. Secure. All words that sounded responsible until you realized they could also build a cage. I looked at June's drawings again. So the legacy room is part of your portfolio. She nodded. Now everything made more sense. This wasn't just a school project to her. It was proof that she could design something real. Something people used. Something that existed beyond grades. And suddenly, my own reason for staying in woodshop felt less private too. If June could risk being wrong about architecture, maybe I could risk being right about woodworking. The first real conflict came that afternoon. Ms. Palmer, the faculty advisor overseeing the legacy room proposals, came into room 214 carrying the committee guidelines. She watched me fitting the curved shelf frame while June checked measurements. This is impressive progress. June signed a quick thank you. Ms. Palmer knew enough ASL to understand. Then she looked at the presentation packet. June, I wanted to revisit the final review format. June stopped moving. I noticed immediately. Ms. Palmer continued carefully. The committee wants every proposal to be easy to evaluate. Your visuals are excellent, obviously, but for the live portion, they still recommend a verbal co-presenter. June's expression hardened. She signed. I can present. Ms. Palmer nodded. I know you can communicate. That isn't the concern. That sentence made my jaw tighten. June's did too. The concern is timing, Ms. Palmer continued. The committee only gives each team 12 minutes. A student speaking while you control visuals may be more efficient. June pulled out her phone. Efficient for whom? Ms. Palmer sighed. For the reviewers. I could feel myself about to intervene. Then I remembered what June wrote on the note. Don't do it because you feel sorry for me. So I stayed quiet. June typed again. If the room is my design, I should be the one responsible for explaining it. Ms. Palmer looked uncomfortable. I'm not trying to take ownership away from you. June's reply came immediately. Then don't. The room went silent. I had to look down to hide a smile. Ms. Palmer glanced at me. Miles, perhaps you could handle the construction explanation while June covers the design concepts. That sounded reasonable. It also sounded like the beginning of something June might hate. So I answered carefully. I can explain what I built. June looked at me. I continued. But I'm not presenting her design for her. Ms. Palmer frowned slightly. That's not what I meant. I know. I'm just saying where my part ends. June's eyes stayed on me. For once, I couldn't read the expression. Ms. Palmer eventually nodded. Fine. Then you two need to show me a presentation format that works within the time limit. After she left, June kept staring. What? She wrote. You didn't have to do that. I know. Then why? Because I'm building shelves. I'm not borrowing your project. She read that twice. Then she walked over to the whiteboard and wrote. Good. I laughed. That's all? She added. Very good. The next hour was the most productive we had. June started sketching a presentation system that didn't rely on someone narrating over her work. Large visual boards. Timed captions. Physical material samples. Short ASL segments for parts she wanted to emphasize herself. I suggested we build a scale section of the shelving so reviewers could touch it. She immediately crossed out half her presentation plan and redesigned around the model. That was when I finally understood what made working with her addictive. June did not protect her ideas from criticism. She protected their purpose. If the purpose survived, she could rebuild everything else. At 5:30, we were still working when my phone rang. Dad. I already knew why. I stepped into the hallway. Hey. His voice was calm. Too calm. I saw the schedule change. Yeah. You put woodshop back. Yes. A short silence. Miles, we already discussed this. I know. You said you understood. I did. Then what changed? I looked through the classroom window. June was standing over the model, trying 3 different placements for the bench supports. I could have blamed the project. I could have said I needed the class temporarily. That would have been easier. Instead I said, I changed my mind. Dad was quiet. About the class? About treating everything I like as something I should eventually outgrow. That sentence came out before I had time to soften it. He exhaled. I'm not trying to take anything away from you. I know. I'm trying to make sure you have options. I know that too. Then why does this sound like you're rejecting my advice? Because I had done exactly what he wanted in my first life. Because I knew where that road ended. Because I had spent 13 years becoming excellent at something I never loved. I couldn't say any of that. So I said, because having options should include the one I actually want. The silence lasted longer this time. Finally, Dad said, "We'll talk tonight." Okay. He hung up. I stood in the hallway for a moment, feeling 17 and 30 at the same time. When I returned, June had stopped working. She pointed at my phone. Family. She nodded. Then typed. Bad? Not bad. Just complicated. She considered that. Complicated is usually bad with better manners. I laughed despite myself. That might be the best thing you've written all week. June leaned against the workbench. Then she typed. Is woodshop important because of this project? I looked at the question. This was where I had to be careful. If I said yes, I would make her responsible for a choice that belonged to me. No. Her expression changed. I continued. The project reminded me that it matters. That's different. June watched me closely. I liked building things before you handed me that note. I just convinced myself liking something wasn't a good enough reason to take it seriously. She typed. And now? I picked up the little walnut joint she had saved. Now I think maybe I was an idiot. June nodded immediately. Wow. She added. Recovering idiot. Much better. We finished the first shelving prototype that evening. It wasn't beautiful. The curve was slightly uneven, one edge still needed sanding, and the support bracket looked heavier than June wanted. But it stood. June ran her hand along the top. Then she took a picture. I watched her frame the shot carefully. You're putting that in the presentation? She shook her head. Portfolio? Another shake. Then she typed. Mine. That one word did something strange to me. Not because it was romantic. Because June collected so little for herself. Her grades became school statistics. Her drawings became display pieces. Her silence became something adults discussed as if it belonged to them. This ugly little prototype was hers because she wanted it to be. Before we left, she stopped at the door and tapped the folded note sticking out of my notebook. I had started carrying it there. She typed. You really kept it? Yes. Why? I thought about saying because I threw it away once. Instead, I answered the truth that belonged to this life. Because it changed my schedule. June rolled her eyes. I smiled. And maybe more than that. She studied me, then signed something slowly. I caught 3 words. Learn. Sign. Faster. I laughed. Bossy. She signed again. This one I understood. Yes. Then she left. I stayed behind for another minute, looking at the half-built room. 3 weeks ago, in my first life, this space had been nothing to me. Woodshop had been something I was ready to abandon. June Holloway had been a girl whose note I thought I could throw away without consequence. Now all 3 were connected. The room. The work. Her. And for the first time, the future I remembered didn't feel like something I needed to repair. It felt like something I was finally willing to replace. The first time June corrected my sign language, she laughed at me for almost a full minute. Silently, obviously. That somehow made it worse. We were in room 214 on Wednesday afternoon, trying to finish the window bench prototype before Ms. Palmer's next review. I had spent the previous 3 nights watching beginner ASL videos after homework. I could introduce myself, ask simple questions, sign numbers, and communicate several extremely useful woodworking terms that no beginner course had actually taught me. At least, I thought I could. June was standing on the other side of the work table when I signed, very confidently. The board needs to be shorter. She stared at my hands. Then at me. Her mouth twitched. What? She shook her head and tried not to smile. What did I say? June pulled out her phone. You said the board needs to be more chicken. I closed my eyes. Great. Her shoulders started shaking. You understood what I meant. She typed with one hand. I understood because there is no chicken in this room. Helpful. Very. I pointed at her phone. You are enjoying this way too much. June put it away and signed slowly. Again. So I tried again. This time, she caught my wrist before I finished. Her fingers adjusted the angle of my hand. The movement lasted maybe 2 seconds. It still made me forget the sign. June noticed. Of course she noticed. She lifted an eyebrow. I forgot. Her expression became openly amused. Don't. That was one sign I definitely knew. She repeated the correct motion, then stepped back. I tried once more. The board needs to be shorter. June nodded. Huh. I pointed at her. No chickens. She gave me a small approving clap. It should not have made me that happy. By then, Working with June had stopped feeling like an unusual decision and started feeling normal in the dangerous way that good things sometimes did. I knew which mechanical pencil she hated lending people. I knew she drank terrible vending machine hot chocolate but refused coffee because she said it tasted like burned homework. I knew that when she erased something 3 times, she was angry at the drawing, but when she erased it once and stared at the page afterward, she was angry at herself. She had started learning things about me too, mostly things I would have preferred she missed. Like the fact that I sanded the same edge repeatedly when nervous, or that I checked my phone whenever my father and I were avoiding a conversation, or that I had begun carrying a small sketchbook in my backpack. That last one was new. In my first life, I had stopped sketching furniture before senior year ended. Now I was doing it during calculus. June discovered the sketchbook when it fell out beside the prototype. She picked it up before I could. Hey. She looked at me. That is private. June immediately handed it back. That made me feel worse. You can look. She folded her arms. I changed my mind. She kept staring. Fine. You can look. June held out one hand. I gave her the sketchbook. She flipped past rough chairs, shelving details, a folding desk, and 3 different versions of a table with storage underneath. Then she stopped. It was a drawing of the legacy room window bench. Except it wasn't her version. I had altered the back angle, changed the support system, and added a narrow ledge along the glass for books and laptops. June studied it for nearly a minute. Then she typed, "Why didn't you show me this?" "Because it's your design." Her expression flattened. I already knew that was the wrong answer. She typed again, "If I wanted someone to build exactly what I drew without thinking, I could hire a machine. I'm not a machine." "Then stop acting like one." I leaned against the table. "You really don't believe in gentle criticism, do you?" She shook her head, then tapped the sketch again. "This is better." I looked at her. "You mean that?" June gave me a look that said I had asked something insulting. Right. She didn't lie to make people comfortable. "Okay," I said. "Then we use it." She wrote one word on the page beneath my sketch. "Ours." I looked at it longer than necessary. Something had shifted. Not in the project. Between us. Until then, I had thought of the legacy room as June's design and myself as the person making it physically possible. That division had felt respectful. Clean. Safe. June had just erased it with 4 letters. Ours. The next day, Ms. Palmer made the same mistake in reverse. She brought 2 members of the legacy room selection committee to inspect our progress. One was Mr. Dalton, the assistant principal. The other was Mrs. Keene, a local architect whose firm had offered to sponsor construction materials for the winning proposal. Mrs. Keene loved the prototype. She ran her fingers under the curved shelf, tested the bench support, then looked at me. "This is excellent work, Miles." "Thanks. How much of the construction planning is yours?" I glanced at June. "Most of it is collaborative." Mrs. Keene nodded politely, but her attention stayed on me. "And the practical revisions?" "Some are mine. Some are June's." June stood beside the drawings, watching. Mr. Dalton stepped closer to the scale model. "This solves our biggest concern about Holloway's original plan." The first proposal felt ambitious. June's jaw tightened. I noticed. Mrs. Keene pointed toward the folding table. "This mechanism is clever. Did you design it?" She was asking me again. I almost answered automatically. Then I remembered the sketch. "Ours." "The hinge layout is mine," I said. "The folding geometry is June's." Mrs. Keene finally turned toward her. June signed a response. Mrs. Keene looked uncertain. "I'm sorry. I don't know ASL." June reached for her tablet. Before she could type, Mr. Dalton said, "She's saying the table can be rearranged depending on group size." June stopped. Every muscle in her face changed. It happened so quickly that I almost missed it. Mr. Dalton probably thought he was helping. That was the problem. June looked directly at him, picked up her tablet, and typed something. Then she held the screen out. "That is not what I said." Mr. Dalton blinked. "Oh." She erased it and typed again. "I said the table should never require one student to ask another student to move before they can use it. Accessibility is part of the geometry." Mrs. Keene read the screen carefully, then looked at the model again. "That's a much more interesting idea." June nodded. Mr. Dalton laughed awkwardly. "My mistake." June gave a polite smile. The review continued, but I could tell she was done enjoying it. After the committee left, she began stacking material samples harder than necessary. I waited until the door shut. "You okay?" She typed without looking at me. Yes. That one means no. She stopped. I had learned enough about her to earn a glare. Then she typed. People keep doing that. Answering for you? She nodded. Sometimes they are right. That almost makes it worse. I understood immediately. If somebody mistranslated her completely, she could correct them. If they guessed correctly, everyone treated the interruption like kindness. What do you want me to do when that happens? June looked surprised. Maybe she expected me to say what I thought she should do. Instead, I waited. She typed. Give me time. That's it? People panic when silence lasts more than 3 seconds. I smiled slightly. That's true. They feel it. I looked at her tablet. I can wait. June stared at me for a moment. Then she typed. I know. That hit differently. Not because it was romantic. Because it sounded like trust. We returned to the prototype, but half an hour later Ms. Palmer came back alone. She held a revised presentation schedule. I spoke with the committee. June straightened. They're willing to approve a modified presentation format. You can use projected text and visual sequencing. June nodded. But, Ms. Palmer continued, they still want a verbal explanation during the technical portion. Miles can handle that. June looked at me. Ms. Palmer must have mistaken the look for agreement. You two already collaborate well. This seems like the easiest solution. Easy. There was that word. In my first life, easy had directed almost everything I did. Choose the safe class. Take the respected major. Accept the better salary. Avoid making people uncomfortable. I knew where easy went. June picked up her tablet. Before she could type, I said, I can explain my work. Ms. Palmer nodded. Exactly. But I won't explain hers. The room became quiet. Ms. Palmer frowned. Miles, nobody is asking you to take credit. That's not what I mean. June was watching me carefully. I continued. If they ask why I chose a support joint, I'll answer. If they ask how I built the shelf, I'll answer. But if they ask what the room is supposed to do or why it's designed this way, that's June's answer. Ms. Palmer sighed. And if the committee needs an immediate clarification, we let her clarify. There may be pauses. So, Ms. Palmer looked at me as if I were being deliberately difficult. Maybe I was. We only have 12 minutes. June suddenly raised a hand. Both of us stopped. She typed something, then turned the tablet toward Ms. Palmer. Give me 10. Ms. Palmer read it twice. 10 minutes? June nodded. You think you can complete the entire presentation in 10? Another nod. How? June pointed at the wall. There were 12 presentation boards taped there. She removed 4. Then another 2. I stared. Those boards represented days of work. She moved to the table, opened her laptop, and deleted 2 planned sections from the visual sequence. June, I said, you don't have to cut half the presentation just because. She held up a finger. Stop. Right. I shut up. She spent the next 20 minutes rebuilding the entire presentation. Not shrinking it. Sharpening it. The project had become overloaded with explanations because we were trying to anticipate every objection. June stripped it back to 3 questions. Who uses the room? What do they need? How does the design answer that? Everything else became evidence. The physical model did more work. The visuals became simpler. Technical details moved onto cards the committee could inspect afterward. When she finished, she started a timer. 9 minutes, 41 seconds. Ms. Palmer looked impressed despite herself. That could work. June typed. It will. Then she pointed at me. I looked at the screen. He gets 90 seconds for construction. Only 90? June shrugged. After everything I've done for you? She typed. Speak faster. Ms. Palmer laughed. So did I. But something important had happened beneath the joke. June hadn't won by demanding everyone adapt completely around her. She had redesigned the problem. That was what she did best. On Friday afternoon, we began building the final scale section for the review. The room smelled like sawdust and glue. Rain tapped steadily against the tall windows, and most of the school had emptied out for the weekend. June was measuring the seat depth when I noticed something taped inside her portfolio. An older version of the legacy room proposal. I recognized the plan, but the title block looked different. There was another name printed beside hers. Presentation lead, Grant Mercer. I frowned. Who's Grant? June stopped measuring. For the first time that week, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. She reached for the folder. I didn't touch it. You don't have to show me. She hesitated, then pulled the old sheet out herself. Grant Mercer was a senior I vaguely remembered. Good speaker. Student council. The kind of guy teachers trusted with microphones. June typed. Miss Palmer suggested him before I asked you to help. Suggested him for construction? She shook her head. Presentation lead. I looked at the old proposal again. June's name was underneath. Design lead, June Holloway. Grant's name came first. Something cold moved through me. Did you agree? June took longer than usual to answer. Finally. Almost. I looked up. She typed another line. I thought it was the only way they would approve the project. That surprised me. June had seemed so certain when she rejected a verbal co-presenter in front of Ms. Palmer. But that version of June had already handed me the note. Already begun fighting. What changed? She looked at me. Then at the curved shelf we had spent all week making. Her answer came slowly. I asked one person to build beside me instead. I stared at the screen. There it was. The part of the note I hadn't understood. She hadn't asked me because she needed a carpenter. She had asked because she was standing at the edge of giving her own work away. And in my first life, I had thrown that request into a trash can. I looked again at Grant's name printed above hers. For years, I had remembered the finished legacy room without remembering June. Now I knew why. She had nearly disappeared from her own project before it even began. June reached for the old proposal. I handed it back. What are you going to do with that? She studied the paper, then tore it in half. I blinked. She tore it again, then dropped the pieces into the recycling bin. I couldn't help smiling. That was dramatic. June typed. I learned from you. From me? She pointed toward the folded note in my notebook, then toward the recycling bin. I understood. You're never letting me forget that, are you? She smiled. No. That sign I understood perfectly. And as rain streaked the windows of room 214, I realized the project had changed again. This was no longer about proving June's design could be built. It was about something harder. Making sure that when it was finished, nobody could look at the room and forget who had imagined it. By the following Tuesday, Grant Mercer knew his name had been removed from the legacy room proposal. He found us during lunch. June was sitting beside me in the back corner of the cafeteria, sketching a revised storage system on a napkin because she had forgotten her notebook in room 214. Grant stopped at the end of the table. He was exactly how I remembered him, neat hair, easy smile, student council confidence. The kind of person teachers asked to moderate assemblies because he could make anything sound organized. June. She looked up, then at me, then back at Grant. He smiled politely. I heard you're handling the presentation yourself now. June nodded. That's good. She waited. Grant glanced at me. And Miles is doing the construction side? Yes, I said. I figured. His tone wasn't rude. That almost made the conversation harder. He pulled out the empty chair across from us. Mind if I sit? June signed something. I didn't catch all of it, but Grant clearly did. Just for a minute. He sat. For a few seconds, he seemed unsure how to begin. Then he said, I wanted to make sure there aren't any hard feelings. June stared at him. Grant rushed on. I know Palmer originally asked me to present with you. I didn't request that. June typed on her phone. I know. He relaxed slightly. I just don't want you thinking I was trying to take over. June read his face for a moment before typing again. Were you going to say no? Grant stopped. That was June. Straight to the point. He looked at the table. I don't know. June waited. Grant sighed. Probably not. She nodded once. Not angry. Just confirming something. I thought I'd be helping, he said. That was how they explained it. June typed. I know that too. He gave a small, uncomfortable laugh. You make it really difficult to apologize. She typed. You haven't done anything yet. That shut all three of us up. Grant stared at the message, then smiled a little. Fair. He stood. Before leaving, he looked at me. Good luck with the review. Thanks. Then he looked at June. I mean it. June gave him a small wave. After he left, I stared at her. You could have made that much more painful. She wrote on the napkin. Why? I don't know. Revenge? Her expression turned skeptical. For almost replacing you in your own presentation. She wrote. He didn't. Because you stopped it. She shook her head. Then wrote. People aren't guilty of the easiest thing they might have done. I read that twice. There were moments when June sounded 17. There were others when she made me feel like I had wasted 13 extra years learning less. You're annoyingly reasonable. She added. Sometimes. Then underneath. Don't rely on it. I smiled. By then, most of our classmates had stopped treating the two of us like a strange combination. Not because they suddenly understood June. Mostly because high school attention moved fast. 2 weeks ago, people had whispered when she handed me a note. Now they were more interested in the basketball playoffs, prom nominations, and a chemistry teacher who had accidentally sent a sarcastic email to the entire senior class. That suited me. The quieter things became outside room 214, the more complicated they became inside it. We had passed the preliminary review. Now we had to build one full-size section of the room before final selection. One. That mattered. We couldn't prove every idea. We had to decide which part best represented the whole design. June wanted the curved shelving. I wanted the window bench. We argued for 40 minutes. She said the shelving carried the visual identity of the room. I said the bench proved the design worked for actual students, not just photographs. She wrote, "The shelf is the first thing people will remember." I replied, "People are supposed to use the room, not remember it." She narrowed her eyes. Then wrote, "That sounded suspiciously intelligent. Thank you. I'm reconsidering." We finally chose the bench. Not because I won. Because June walked into the room the next morning, sat beneath the window, and spent 10 minutes watching how students passing in the hallway naturally stopped there to talk. Then she changed her mind. That was another thing I liked about her. When reality contradicted her idea, reality won. The full-size build started Wednesday afternoon. This time, the work was harder. Real lumber. Real dimensions. Real mistakes. I miscut one support and lost nearly an hour. June ordered the wrong thickness of plywood and spent 20 minutes silently furious at herself. Neither of us pretended the other mistake was no big deal. We fixed them. At around 6, she handed me a bottle of water. I took it. "Thanks." She pointed to the bench frame, then signed slowly. "Sit." "I'm covered in sawdust." She pointed again. "Bossy." Another point. I sat. The unfinished bench creaked once beneath my weight. June watched the joint. Then me. Then the joint again. "It holds." She smiled. I leaned back against the temporary support. "You designed a comfortable bench." She typed. "We designed it." There was that word again. We. This time, I didn't argue. June sat beside me. For a while, neither of us worked. The room was unusually quiet. Late sunlight came through the tall windows and turned sawdust on the floor almost gold. I looked at the far wall, where our final presentation boards were lined up. June's name appeared at the bottom of every one. So did mine. Different roles. Same project. Something about seeing that felt more meaningful than it should have. June tapped my knee. I looked at her. She typed, "Your father's still angry?" I had told her about our conversation. "A little." "At you?" "No." I thought about it. "He thinks I'm making decisions emotionally." June raised an eyebrow. "That expression says you agree with him." She typed, "All decisions are emotional. Somewhere ties." I laughed. "You definitely need to put that on a wall somewhere." She smiled. Then her face became more serious. "What does he want you to study?" "Finance. Maybe economics." "What do you want?" The answer came faster now. "Furniture design." June didn't react dramatically. No encouraging smile. No, I knew it. She simply typed. "Then apply." I looked at her. "That easy?" She shook her head. Then wrote. "No. That's simple." That was different. I understood immediately. Applying would not make my father understand. It would not guarantee a career. It would not erase the practical questions I had spent years using as excuses. But the next action was still simple. Apply. "What about you?" June looked at me. "You applied to all 3 architecture programs?" She nodded. "Even the one your counselor said was unrealistic?" Another nod. "Good." She held up her phone. "Your turn." I smiled. "Fine." I opened the university application portal on my phone. For several minutes, I stared at the list of programs. The school I had attended in my first life was already saved. Business analytics. There it was. A future I knew. A degree I could complete. A career I could succeed in. For a second, knowing the future felt less like a gift and more like temptation. I knew exactly how safe that path was. The problem was that I also knew exactly how empty it could become. June didn't look at my screen. She didn't push. She picked up the ruler and went back to checking the bench dimensions. That helped more than encouragement would have. I searched for the design school, then added furniture and product design to my application list. My thumb hovered over the save button. I pressed it. Nothing dramatic happened. No rush of music. No sudden certainty. The application simply updated. but my chest felt different. June glanced over. I turned the screen toward her. She read it, then smiled. Not wide, not proud, just warm. She signed something. I caught it this time. Good choice. I haven't gotten in. She shrugged. That wasn't what you said. She smiled again. She was right. It was the choice that mattered first. The next morning, our class advisor called June and me into her office. Ms. Palmer was already there. So was Mr. Dalton. That made me nervous. June noticed and lightly tapped the side of my hand beneath the desk. Not holding it. Just one tap. Stay calm. Mr. Dalton opened a folder. The selection committee has reviewed the updated proposal. June sat straighter. We like it. I exhaled. But there's one concern remaining. Of course there was. Mr. Dalton turned one of the blueprint sheets toward us. At the bottom, beneath our names, was a new line. Faculty Project Liaison, Susan Palmer. June frowned. Ms. Palmer looked equally confused. I didn't add that. Mr. Dalton nodded. The district facilities office did. He explained that because the winning legacy room would become a permanent school space, the district required an adult liaison to sign off on final modifications and vendor decisions. That part sounded normal. Then he continued. For public materials, the district also prefers the adult liaison's name to appear as primary project contact. June's expression changed. I felt my stomach drop. There it was again. Not Grant this time. Not a student taking the microphone. Something more respectable. More procedural. Harder to argue with. Mr. Dalton seemed to sense the problem. This isn't about authorship. June immediately typed. Then why is her name first? Ms. Palmer looked at the blueprint. Then at Dalton. That's a fair question. He rubbed his forehead. It's administrative formatting. June typed. Formatting teaches people what matters. Nobody answered. That was the midpoint of the entire problem, though I didn't understand it fully until later. I had thought June's obstacle was presentation. She couldn't speak, so adults kept trying to find easier ways for her work to reach the room. But the real problem was bigger. Every system around her was designed to convert her into something easier to manage. A co-presenter. An adult contact. A cleaner explanation. None of those choices looked cruel. That was why they were dangerous. They could erase her without anyone ever deciding to erase her. Mr. Dalton looked at Ms. Palmer. I'll ask whether we can change the display order. June typed. Don't ask for me. Give me the contact. He hesitated, then slowly nodded. Okay. He wrote down the district facilities coordinator's email. June took it. Meeting over. In the hallway, I expected her to be angry. Instead, she was already typing an email. You're doing it now? She nodded. What are you saying? June showed me. It was brief. Professional. No emotional speech. She explained that Ms. Palmer should absolutely remain faculty liaison, but student authorship should appear first on all public materials because the proposal had been designed and developed by students. Then she attached the original plans and the current build documentation. At the bottom she added, if district policy requires otherwise, please send me the written policy so I can understand the requirement. I stared. That is terrifying. June looked offended. In a good way. She nodded. Then send it. 2 hours later, the coordinator replied. There was no written policy. It had been a template. They changed the order. Student designers, June Holloway and Miles Rowan. Faculty liaison, Susan Palmer. That was it. One email. One corrected blueprint. No victory speech. But June printed the revised title block and taped it above the workbench. I stood beside her, looking at our names. You know what I thought when I opened your note? She glanced at me. I thought the big mystery was why you wanted me here. June waited. I was wrong. She typed. What's the mystery now? I looked around room 214. At the bench. At the drawings. At the new title block. At first, I thought you needed somebody to help your design exist. June watched me. Now I think you needed one person who wouldn't make it easier by making you smaller. Her expression changed. The teasing disappeared. She lowered her phone. For several seconds, she just looked at me. Then she signed slowly. I understood every word. That is why I chose you. My chest tightened. I could have asked what she meant by chose. For the project? For the note? For something more? The old version of me would have needed an answer immediately. This time, I didn't. I looked at her hands and signed back, awkwardly but correctly. Then keep choosing me. June froze. I knew enough ASL now to realize I had signed it exactly the way I meant to. Her cheeks turned pink. Very pink. I smiled. She grabbed her phone, typed something, and shoved the screen toward me. Your signing has become dangerous. Was it wrong? She shook her head. That's what I thought. June tried to glare at me. It failed. And for the first time since we started working together, the silence between us had nothing to do with words we couldn't say. It was full of something neither of us was ready to name yet. The first student who tested our window bench hated it. Not politely. Not in the vague way people criticize school projects because they wanted to sound useful. She sat down, tried to move her wheelchair closer to the built-in table, hit the lower support with one footrest, and said, "Yeah, this doesn't work." June's face went completely still. We were conducting a small user test in room 214 before the final committee review. Ms. Palmer had suggested 6 students who represented different ways the room might actually be used, someone from robotics who carried equipment everywhere, 2 students who studied between practices, a student with a temporary knee brace, a wheelchair user named Tessa Monroe, and one guy whose greatest qualification seemed to be falling asleep in every available chair. The sleepy guy loved the bench. Tessa couldn't use half of it. June crouched beside the table and looked underneath. Tessa pointed with one hand. The top height is fine. It's this support. I can come straight in, but then I'm trapped at an angle. I expected June to reach for her tablet. Instead, she signed. Tessa blinked, then smiled and signed back. I understood maybe half of it. June asked whether changing the support would be enough. Tessa answered that it would help, but the table's surface was also too deep from her seated position. June looked at me. I already knew what that meant. We have to rebuild the whole right side. She nodded. Tessa glanced between us. Is that bad? Depends how much June likes sleeping. June signed something. Tessa laughed. What did she say? She says sleep is inefficient. June slapped my arm. Tessa laughed harder. That is definitely not what she said. I looked at June. She was smiling. Fine. What did you say? Tessa translated. She said you're the one who needs sleep because your cuts get worse after 6. June looked unbearably pleased with herself. Traitor. Tessa rolled away still laughing. The moment the door closed, June turned back to the bench. Her smile disappeared. She measured the support twice. Then a third time. We have 4 days, I said. She nodded. We could leave it. Her head snapped toward me. I said we could. I didn't say we should. June stared at the bench again. The section in front of us had taken nearly 2 weeks. We had already sanded it, finished it, photographed it. Mrs. Keene had praised it during the preliminary review. It was the strongest visual piece in the whole proposal. June picked up a pencil and drew a large X across the right side support. I laughed once. All right, then. She typed. You disagree? No. You hesitated. Because I was calculating how late we're going to be here tonight. She pointed toward the X. You're right. It doesn't work. June looked at me carefully. I knew why. A few weeks ago, she had told me people called her designs unrealistic. Every revision risked sounding like proof they had been right. So I added, that doesn't mean the design failed. Her expression softened slightly. It means Tessa used it for 30 seconds and found something we missed in 2 weeks. June typed. That is failure. No. Failure would be knowing and leaving it because the committee already likes it. She looked at the bench. Then wrote. That was annoyingly good. I've been spending too much time with you. We tore apart the nicest thing we had built. It hurt. Actually hurt. The finished trim had to come off. One panel cracked during removal. The support I had spent an entire Saturday shaping ended up on the scrap pile. June didn't try to preserve the curve she loved. She redesigned around the person who needed to use it. By 7:30, room 214 looked worse than it had that morning. By 8:15, I finally understood the new structure. What if the support comes from the back instead? June was already drawing. I moved beside her. No front leg at all. Cantilever it from this frame, reinforce the wall connection, and the entire space underneath stays clear. She changed the angle. I changed the thickness. She changed it back. I told her she was wrong. She proved I was wrong. At 8:40, we had something better than the original. Then my phone buzzed. A reminder filled the screen. Design School Portfolio Submission, 11:59 p.m. I stared at it. June noticed immediately. She pointed at the phone. My application. Her eyes widened. I finished most of it. I just haven't uploaded the furniture sketches. June looked at the clock. Then toward the half-rebuilt bench. I already knew what she was going to say. She signed. Go! We're not done. She repeated it. Go! The review is Friday. She grabbed her tablet. My project will survive one night without you. Your application will not survive midnight. I can upload it here. She looked around. The school Wi-Fi had been cutting out for the last hour. Fair point. I'll finish this support first. June shook her head. No. Another shake. Then she typed. Miles, go home. It was the first time she had used my name in a message that felt like an order. I should have listened immediately. Instead, I looked at the bench. A strange old instinct was pulling at me. Finish what people need from you first. Deal with what you want afterward. That was exactly how I had lost 13 years the first time. June must have seen something change in my face. She typed another message. Don't turn this project into another reason to postpone yourself. I read it once. Then again. That was rude. She nodded. Accurate too. Another nod. I packed my laptop. Before leaving, I pointed at the bench. Do not try to lift that frame alone. June rolled her eyes. I mean it. She signed. I know. And don't redesign the entire left side while I'm gone. She hesitated. That hesitation was suspicious. Her smile returned. I stopped at the door. June. She looked up. Thank you. Her expression changed. She signed a question. I understood it. For what? For not needing me enough to let me make a bad decision. June stared at me for a second. Then signed slowly. I want you here. She paused. My heartbeat did something stupid. Then she continued. That is different from needing you here. I didn't answer immediately, because that was probably the sweetest thing anyone had ever told me without trying to be sweet. I signed back. Good. Then, because my ASL had improved just enough to make me reckless. I want to come back. June's eyes stayed on my hands. I added, tomorrow. I mean tomorrow. She gave me a look that said she absolutely knew what I was doing. I left before I embarrassed myself further. At home, Dad was still awake. He found me at the dining table with my laptop open, photographing the little walnut joint June had saved and adding it to my portfolio. He stood behind me for a while without speaking. Finally he said, so this is serious. I looked up. Yeah. He pulled out the chair across from me. I expected an argument. Instead, he looked through the images. The folding desk. The bench. My revised shelf. The ugly chair joint. You made all of these? Most of them. He stopped on the legacy room drawings. And this one? June designed the room. We developed some pieces together. Dad nodded slowly. You're good. That should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt sad. Not because he had doubted me. Because I had spent years waiting for permission I never actually needed. I'm applying tonight. I figured. To furniture and product design. His jaw tightened slightly. There it was. The disagreement still existed. But this time, neither of us pretended otherwise. Dad leaned back. I still think you should keep business as an option. I know. And you're not going to. I might. But not because I'm scared this isn't respectable enough. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. That's a more grown-up answer than I expected. I almost laughed. You have no idea. At 11:14 p.m., I pressed submit. My application disappeared into the system. For several seconds, I just stared at the confirmation screen. Then my phone buzzed. June. A photo. The rebuilt bench frame was standing. Underneath, she had typed, Tessa can fit now. I smiled. Then another message appeared. Did you submit? I sent back the confirmation screenshot. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally June sent one word. Good. I laughed. I typed. Very good? A moment later. Don't push it. The next afternoon, Tessa returned. She rolled beneath the revised table without touching a single support. June crouched beside her, watching every inch of clearance. Tessa tested the surface. Reached the storage shelf. Turned easily. Then she looked at June. This one works. June smiled. Not because she had been proven right. Because she had been willing to be wrong. That evening, after everyone left, I found the large X-mark drawing from the old bench lying on the table. Keeping this? June nodded. Why? She took her pencil and wrote in the corner. The first version looked better. Then beneath it, the second version was better. I understood exactly why she wanted to keep it. I picked up the pencil and added one line. Good thing we opened it up. June read it, then looked at me. Her eyes flicked toward the folded note still tucked safely inside my notebook. She smiled. And without asking, She reached across the table and slipped her hand into mine. No audience. No committee. No dramatic confession. Just sawdust on both our sleeves and a half-finished room around us. I looked down at our hands. June immediately started to pull away, suddenly less confident than she had been about anything all week. I tightened my fingers. Not enough to trap her. Just enough to answer. She looked up. I signed with my free hand. Stay. This time, I got the sign right. June smiled and stayed. By Friday morning, our finished prototype looked almost nothing like the one the committee had praised a week earlier. That was a good thing. The new window bench was cleaner, simpler, and easier to use. The table support no longer blocked wheelchair access. The storage opened from two sides. The back angle had changed just enough that students could actually sit there for more than 10 minutes without hating us. June had also cut the presentation down to 9 minutes and 38 seconds. I knew because she timed it 7 times. Again? I asked. She nodded. You know the committee only gives us 12. She signed. 10 is safer. Why? People ask stupid questions. I laughed. That is not going on the presentation board. She gave me a look that clearly said it should. The final review would happen after lunch in the district conference room beside the library. 3 student teams had made it through preliminary selection. One proposal converted room 214 into a traditional study lounge. Another focused on college counseling and quiet work booths. Ours was the strangest. It was also the only one that had been torn apart halfway through because an actual student couldn't use it. June was proud of that. Not the mistake. The correction. At 11:30, Ms. Palmer came into the workshop holding a tablet. I have one last update. June stopped checking the presentation boards. Ms. Palmer looked uncomfortable enough that I immediately disliked whatever she was about to say. The district chair reviewed the accessibility modifications. She likes them. June nodded. But she's worried about the live presentation format. There it was again. I leaned against the workbench. What now? Ms. Palmer looked at June. She wants to make sure the judges don't lose time waiting for typed responses during questions. June's expression flattened. She suggested a compromise. June picked up her tablet. What compromise? Ms. Palmer hesitated. Pre-record your full presentation with captions. Then during questions, Miles can answer verbally. I looked at June. She was completely still. The suggestion made sense on paper. That was the problem. It was efficient, professional, safe, and it quietly removed June from the only part of the process she had fought hardest to keep. Ms. Palmer rushed to add, your design would still be completely yours. The recording would show you. Your name would be first. June typed, but I would not be presenting. You would be presenting through the recording. June looked at her, then typed, would you say that to someone who could speak? Ms. Palmer stopped. No. June nodded. That was the whole answer. Ms. Palmer sighed. I understand why you're frustrated. June shook her head. She typed again. I'm not frustrated. I'm declining. I almost smiled. Ms. Palmer looked toward me. Maybe she expected help. I had learned better. This is June's call. I know, she said. But Miles, you understand the practical issue. I do. And she said no. The room went quiet. Ms. Palmer looked between us. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Fine. June blinked. I had to bring the option to you. She held up both hands. You rejected it. I'll tell them. June's shoulders relaxed. Then Ms. Palmer added, but you still need a plan for questions. June immediately turned to the whiteboard. Of course she did. She drew 3 boxes. Questions about design. Questions about construction. Questions about accessibility. Then she assigned communication formats to each. For design, she would respond using pre-built visual slides she could navigate quickly. For accessibility, she would sign while Tessa interpreted if Tessa was comfortable doing it. For construction, I would answer only the parts one had built. Wait, I said. Tessa? June nodded. You already asked her? Another nod. And she agreed? June held up her phone. Tessa's message was simple. If you buy me fries afterward. I laughed. You planned terrifyingly far ahead. June signed. Yes. The conference room was full by 1:15. Not an auditorium. No giant crowd. Just the committee, faculty advisors, 6 student presenters, a few invited staff members, and the teams waiting their turn. That somehow made me more nervous. Big crowds could become noise. Small rooms noticed everything. June sat beside me with her tablet on her lap. Her knee bounced once. Then again. I leaned closer. Nervous? She gave me an irritated look. Right. Stupid question. Her knee bounced again. I held my hand low beside the chair where no one else could see. June looked at it, then at me. She placed her hand in mine. For maybe 5 seconds. Then the committee chair called our names. June let go. We stood. The first 3 minutes belonged entirely to her. No one spoke for her. No one narrated over the visuals. June advanced the presentation herself, using short caption sequences and clear ASL where she wanted emphasis. The first slide showed room 214 as it existed now. The second showed movement patterns students had created during our observations. The third showed the original layout. Then June placed the broken first bench support on the table. That surprised everyone. Mrs. Keene leaned forward. June switched slides. A caption appeared. The first prototype passed committee review and failed its first real user. Then came photos of Tessa testing it. The obstruction. The redesign. The rebuilt frame. June signed something longer. Tessa interpreted from the side. She says a room is not successful because the drawing looks good. It is successful when the person who needs it most does not have to ask for special treatment to use it. Nobody interrupted. Not even Mr. Dalton. I looked at the committee. They were paying attention in a way that had nothing to do with sympathy. They wanted to know what came next. That mattered. At 6 minutes, June turned to me. My part. I stepped beside the full-size prototype section. 90 seconds, I said quietly. June held up one finger. 1 minute. I stared at her. She smiled. Traitor. I explained the cantilevered support, the laminated curve, and the reason we changed the wall anchoring after the user test. I stopped after 68 seconds. June looked impressed. I whispered, speak faster. She almost laughed. Then came questions. Mrs. Keene asked June why she had chosen modular furniture instead of fixed stations. June brought up the layout response immediately. Mr. Dalton asked me about maintenance. I answered. The district chair asked whether our revised accessible section increased cost. June nodded, then showed the exact difference. $480. The chair frowned slightly. Would you remove another feature to stay within the original budget? June looked at the question, then typed something. She turned the tablet toward the committee. Yes. She changed slides. The decorative ceiling panels disappeared from the rendering. Mrs. Keene blinked. You would cut those? June nodded. The chair asked, why? June signed. Tessa interpreted. Because decoration is optional. Access is not. The room became very quiet. I looked at June. She wasn't trying to win. That was why she was convincing. She had no interest in defending every piece of her original idea, only the parts that mattered. The last question came from one of the district facilities managers. He looked at our student designer names, then at June. Who will oversee construction if this proposal is selected? June pointed toward Ms. Palmer. Faculty liaison, Ms. Palmer said. Then June pointed at herself. The manager looked uncertain. June typed, I will remain student design lead through installation. He nodded slowly. What changes are required on site? She typed again. Then asked me. No hesitation. No explanation. Just that. Ask me. Something about those 2 words hit me harder than the entire presentation. Because that was all she had been asking for from the beginning. Not special treatment. Not automatic agreement. The chance to answer before someone answered for her. We finished in 9 minutes and 52 seconds. June was furious. I knew immediately. What? She showed me the timer. 14 seconds under 10 is good. She signed. Too slow. I laughed. You are impossible. She signed back. You stayed. That stopped me. For a second, the room around us disappeared. I signed carefully. You asked. June looked at my hands. Then smiled. The committee sent everyone out while they deliberated. We waited in room 214. Grant's team was there too. His proposal had made the final 3, though he was presenting a different project now. He sat on the opposite side of the room, checking his phone. After a few minutes, he looked at June. That was good. She nodded. No, seriously, he said. Better than if I had presented it. June's expression changed slightly. Then she typed. Yes. I choked on my water. Grant laughed. Still making apologies difficult. June smiled. Then she added. Thank you. That seemed to surprise him more. The committee returned 20 minutes later. Ms. Palmer came in first. Her face gave nothing away. Mr. Dalton followed. Then Mrs. Keene. The district chair stood near the front. We reviewed all 3 proposals. My heartbeat sped up. June was sitting very still beside me. The selected legacy room design is June Holloway and Miles Rowan's proposal. Applause started. Small. Real. I turned toward June. For 1 second, she didn't react. Then her eyes widened. She looked at me like she needed confirmation. I nodded. We won. She shook her head. I frowned. Then she signed. Selected. Not built. I laughed. Of course that's what you're thinking. June grabbed my sleeve and pulled me into a hug. That surprised both of us. Her arms wrapped around me tightly. Mine came around her a second later. For maybe 3 seconds, neither of us cared that anyone was watching. Then June stepped back. Her face was bright red. Grant looked away, clearly trying not to smile. Tessa absolutely did not look away. She signed something at June. June covered her face. What did she say? Tessa grinned. You don't need to know. I definitely need to know. June pointed at the door. Leave. I laughed. Later, after the committee members had gone, Ms. Palmer gave us the next construction schedule. Work would begin after spring break. The district contractor would handle electrical and structural changes. June and I would remain involved in the built-ins and furniture prototypes. This should have felt like the ending. It didn't, because the problem we had been fighting was finally solved. The room would be built. June's name would stay on it. She would remain design lead. And for the first time, there was nothing practical left standing between us. That was somehow more frightening. At 6 that evening, we were alone in room 214 again. June was packing the presentation boards. I found the original note tucked inside my notebook. The paper had softened at the folds from being opened too many times. She noticed. She pointed at it. You started this. June nodded. I looked at the last line. Don't do it because you feel sorry for me. I think I finally understand why you wrote that. She waited. You weren't asking for help because you couldn't do this. June watched me carefully. You were asking because you didn't want to do it alone. Her eyes lowered. Then she signed. Yes. I stepped closer. Why me? There it was. The question I had deliberately avoided for weeks. June looked toward the window bench. Then back at me. She typed slowly. Because you made one ugly chair. I stared. That is the least romantic answer imaginable. June smiled. Then typed another line. And when everyone laughed at it, you still brought it back to class the next day after fixing the joint. I remembered that. Barely. The chair had collapsed during critique. People laughed. I repaired it overnight and returned with the same ugly thing. I had forgotten anyone noticed. June continued. You were embarrassed. You fixed it anyway. Then. I thought maybe you would understand me. My throat tightened. Not because she had secretly loved me forever. Because the reason was so specific. So small. So completely hers. She had not chosen me because I was popular. Or kind. Or the only person who treated her normally. She chose me because once, without knowing she was watching, I had failed publicly and returned anyway. That was the kind of person she needed beside her when she was about to stop fighting for her own project. I looked at the note. In my first life, I threw it away before learning any of that. This time, I folded it carefully and put it back in my notebook. June touched my wrist. I looked at her. She signed slowly. What now? I knew she meant the project. But not only the project. I smiled. Now we build the room. June waited. I took a breath. And after that, I'd like to take you somewhere that does not contain plywood. Her eyes widened. A date, I clarified. Her cheeks turned pink again. An actual date. June stared at me for 3 full seconds. I waited. I had gotten very good at that. Then she signed. Okay. I smiled. Just okay? She reached for her phone. I thought she was going to type something sarcastic. Instead, she opened the note app and wrote, Very good. Then she turned the screen toward me. I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the bench we nearly tore apart 4 days earlier. June sat beside me. This time, she took my hand first. Our first date happened on a Saturday afternoon at a furniture salvage warehouse 20 minutes outside town. Apparently, when I told June I wanted to take her somewhere without plywood, she considered that a suggestion rather than a rule. I stood between stacks of old doors, metal table legs, discarded cabinets, and enough reclaimed lumber to rebuild half the school while she examined a dented walnut drawer front. This contains wood. June typed. Technically, you said plywood. You exploited a loophole. She smiled and tucked the drawer front under her arm. What are you even going to do with that? She pointed at me. Absolutely not. I'm not spending our first date building furniture. Her smile widened. Then she typed, second date. I stared at the screen. June's expression stayed perfectly calm, but the tips of her ears had turned pink. That was smooth. She shrugged. I had imagined our first date being awkward. I thought I would spend too much time wondering when to hold her hand, whether she expected me to talk constantly, whether silence would feel different outside room 214. Instead, we spent 40 minutes arguing over whether an old oak school desk deserved to be restored. June thought the carvings on the surface should stay. I thought somebody named Trevor did not deserve immortality just because he had once scratched Trevor plus K into school property. June typed, history. Vandalism. History is mostly old vandalism with better lighting. That cannot possibly be true. She gave me a look. I laughed. The strange thing was that silence with June never felt like a gap I had to fill anymore. Sometimes she typed. Sometimes she signed. Sometimes I understood. Sometimes I didn't. Sometimes we simply looked at the same thing and moved on. A month earlier, I would have mistaken that quiet for distance. Now I knew better. We left the warehouse with a walnut drawer front, 2 brass handles June insisted were useful, and a small piece of maple I bought even though I had no plan for it. Then, while we were sitting outside with fries between us, June's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Everything in her face changed. I recognized the university logo before she turned the phone toward me. Architecture admissions. She opened the email. Read it, then stopped breathing for a second. I leaned forward. June? She handed me the phone. Congratulations. I read the first line twice. She had been accepted into the architecture program she wanted most. Not the school with the best overall ranking. Not the one her counselor had recommended. The one she had chosen because its undergraduate studio focused on human-centered public design. I looked up. You got in. June nodded. You actually got in. Another nod. Then she covered her face with both hands. I laughed and pulled them down. You're allowed to look happy. She signed quickly. I caught enough. I am happy. Then why do you look terrified? Her hand stopped. That answer took longer. Finally she typed. It's 6 hours away. I read the sentence. For the first time that afternoon, the future entered the space between us. Not dramatically. No impossible choice. Just 6 hours. Far enough that we would not accidentally see each other after class. Far enough that dates required planning. Far enough that whatever we were becoming could no longer depend on sharing room 214 every afternoon. I should have expected that. Instead, I realized some part of me had quietly assumed rebirth meant I could fix every regret by making better choices early enough. But June's acceptance was not a problem to fix. It was exactly what she wanted. That's great, I said. Her eyes narrowed. I knew that look. What? She typed. You said that too quickly. I mean it. You can mean it and still dislike part of it. That was June again. No polite lie allowed just because it sounded mature. I looked down at the fries. I hate that it's 6 hours away. She nodded. I'm still happy you got in. Another nod. And I'm not going to ask you to choose somewhere closer. June's expression softened. Then she typed. Good. Because I wouldn't. I laughed. Romantic. She stole one of my fries. But that's what I like about you. She stopped chewing. I continued before I lost the nerve. You don't make the answer prettier just because I might prefer it. June looked at me for a long moment, then signed slowly enough that I understood every word. I don't want you to choose a smaller life for me. I nodded. I won't. She pointed at me, then signed. Same rule. I knew exactly what she meant. My application. My future. My turn not to make myself smaller. 3 days later, my answer arrived. I was in woodshop when the email came through. Mr. Alvarez was helping another student with a cabinet hinge. June was in room 214 meeting with the contractor about final material samples. I opened the message alone. Accepted. Furniture and product design. For several seconds, I didn't move. I had imagined this moment differently. Maybe because in my first life, getting into college had felt like confirmation that I had followed the right plan. Teachers congratulated me. My father took me to dinner. Everyone knew what came next. This acceptance felt more frightening, because I had actually chosen it. Mr. Alvarez noticed my expression. Good news? I turned the screen toward him. He read it, then slapped my shoulder hard enough to move me half a step. Knew it. You did not. I absolutely did. You told me my first chair looked like a medieval punishment device. It did. He pointed at the screen. They accepted you anyway. Character development. I laughed. Then I went straight to room 214. June was standing beside 3 upholstery samples when I came through the door. She looked at my face. Her eyes widened immediately. I held up my phone. She crossed the room so quickly that one of the contractors had to step aside. June, read the email. Then she hugged me. No hesitation this time. I wrapped my arms around her and laughed into her hair. When she stepped back, she signed. You did it. We did not do that. She frowned. This one is mine. Her expression changed. Then she smiled. Exactly. That was something we were beginning to understand. Not every victory had to become shared property just because we cared about each other. Her architecture acceptance was hers. My design acceptance was mine. The legacy room was ours. Knowing the difference made the word ours mean more. That evening, Dad asked to see the acceptance letter. He read the entire email at the kitchen counter. Then he set my phone down. Congratulations. Thanks. He was quiet. I waited. Finally he said, I'm still worried. I know. About the industry. About debt. About whether you'll still love doing this when it becomes work. Those were reasonable worries. The old me might have treated them like a tax. This time I said, I'm worried about some of that too. Dad looked surprised. But I'd rather deal with problems from a choice I made than spend 10 years wondering what would have happened if I made it. He studied me. I wondered if I sounded too old again. Then his shoulders dropped slightly. I can't argue with that. That's new. Don't get used to it. I smiled. He almost did too. By late April, construction on the legacy room was nearly finished. The curved shelving was installed. The revised accessible bench fit beneath the windows. The modular tables finally folded without catching fingers, after 3 versions and 1 argument so serious June refused to look at me for 17 minutes. Our names were printed on a small plaque near the entrance. Nothing oversized. Nothing ceremonial. Just, student designers, June Holloway, Miles Rowan. The first afternoon we were allowed inside the almost finished room, June walked through slowly. She touched the shelf, checked the table, sat on the bench. Then she looked at the plaque. I stood beside her. Worth the note? June smiled. She took out her phone. Mostly. Mostly? You still took too long to learn ASL. I've been studying for 2 months. She signed something. I understood. Chicken. I groaned. You are never letting that die. June laughed silently. Then she took my hand. The room around us was no longer a drawing. That mattered. But what mattered more was that neither of us had reached this point by following the future someone else had prepared. June had not handed away her voice because speaking another way was easier for everyone else. I had not abandoned the work I loved because a safer life looked more respectable. And neither of us had asked the other to choose differently just to make being together easier. June tapped my hand. I looked at her. She signed. 6 hours. I know. Then. Still want second date? I smiled. The one where you make me build something out of that ugly walnut drawer? She nodded. I thought you were supposed to be the smart one. June pulled me closer by the sleeve and kissed my cheek. Quick. Warm. Completely unexpected. Then she stepped away looking far more shocked by her own decision than I was. I touched my cheek. That was definitely not in the project plan. June's face turned red. She grabbed her phone. Good. I smiled. Very good? She tried not to laugh. Then she typed. Don't push it. Outside the windows, students crossed the courtyard without knowing how many arguments, mistakes, revised measurements, and difficult choices had gone into the room around us. That was fine. They didn't need to know. The room was built to be used, not admired. And whatever June and I were building now felt the same way. It didn't need to look perfect from the outside. It only had to be ours enough that neither of us disappeared inside it. The legacy room opened on the last Friday before graduation. There was no huge ceremony, which suited June perfectly. Mr. Dalton gave a short introduction, Ms. Palmer thanked the contractors, and Mrs. Keene said a few words about student-led design. Then the doors opened and everyone immediately stopped caring about speeches because there were new couches, charging outlets, tables, shelves, and a window bench nobody had been allowed to use for months. Within 10 minutes, the room was full. That was the best possible review. Nobody stood around admiring our drawings. Students dropped backpacks beneath the benches. 2 juniors dragged a modular table closer to the whiteboard. Tessa rolled into the accessible section without slowing down and gave June a thumbs up as if she were conducting one final inspection. I leaned against the doorway. June stood beside me. You're doing it again, I said. She looked over, watching whether people used things the way you expected. She nodded. Any disasters? June considered the room, then signed. 1. I immediately straightened. Where? She pointed toward a sophomore sitting on the window ledge instead of the bench we had spent weeks designing. I stared at him. You know what? I hate students. June laughed. Then she signed. Bad designer. Blame user. That's not what I said. Her eyebrow rose. Fine. It was exactly what I said. The room had changed since the first afternoon I walked into it. So had we. The old drafting tables were gone. The broken shelves had been replaced. Sunlight came through windows that no longer had stacks of unused furniture blocking them. But one thing had stayed. Above the work table near the entrance was the small plaque with our names. June Holloway. Miles Rowan. The first time I saw my name beside hers, it felt like proof we had finished something. Now it felt different. It reminded me that neither of us had disappeared into the other person's story. That mattered more. After school, the crowd slowly emptied. Graduation rehearsal was Monday, and most seniors had somewhere else to be. June stayed behind to collect the last of her sketches from the storage cabinet. I helped, although help mostly meant she handed me folders and rejected every organizational suggestion I made. You alphabetize everything. She typed. Because alphabetizing works. It lacks imagination. She stared at me. Architecture valedictorian defending alphabetical order. Tragic. June typed. Furniture student who labels screws by size criticizing organization. That's different. Because you do it? Exactly. She smiled and pulled one final portfolio case from the bottom shelf. Something slipped out. A folded piece of paper landed on the floor. I recognized it immediately. My note. I checked my notebook. The pocket where I had kept it for months was empty. When did you steal that? June picked it up and signed. Today. That is still stealing. She ignored me. Then she unfolded it on the finished table. The paper was creased and worn now. Her original handwriting remained clear. I know you're dropping woodshop next semester. Don't. Meet me in room 214 after school. I need you to build something with me. And, underneath. Also, your chair prototype was ugly, but the joint was clever. I smiled. You really opened with an insult. June typed. You came. Apparently it worked. She turned the note over. The back was blank. Then she took out her pen. I watched her write. Not quickly. June almost always knew what she wanted to say before she started typing or signing. This time she stopped twice. That made me nervous. When she finished, she folded the paper and handed it to me. You know I'm opening this one immediately. June nodded. No 10-year delay. Her expression changed slightly at that. For half a second, I wondered if I had said too much. Then she pointed at the note. I opened it. Her handwriting covered only 3 lines. I used to think the best thing we could build together was this room. I was wrong. 10 years from now, I want a home with things you built in it. I stopped reading. Then read it again. June was suddenly very interested in reorganizing a stack of folders. June. She kept looking away. I stepped closer. You wrote home. Her ears turned red. She nodded. With me? Now she looked at me as if I had failed a basic reading test. Just confirming. June reached for the note. I pulled it out of reach. No chance. She narrowed her eyes. I threw away one note from you. I'm never doing that again. Her expression softened. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she signed. 10 years is a long time. I nodded. It is. We will change. I hope so. That surprised her. I took her hand. I don't want you to stay 17 forever just because I like you now. June watched me carefully. And I don't want us making promises that require you to become smaller so they can come true. Her fingers tightened around mine. We have different schools. Different cities. We're probably going to fight about terrible furniture and whether you're allowed to keep random drawer fronts forever. June signed immediately. I am. See? Already a problem. She smiled. I looked at the note again. But I want that future. I pointed at the last line. I want to see if we can build it. June's eyes brightened. Then she signed. Together? This time, I didn't need her to slow down. I answered in ASL. Together. She stared at my hands. Then at me. And kissed me. Not my cheek this time. It was soft and brief, but when she stepped back, she looked so pleased with herself that I laughed. That was planned. June shook her head. Liar. She signed. Prove it. I've created a monster. She smiled and tugged me toward the door. I stopped long enough to look back at room 214. Students would fill it next year. They would scratch tables we had spent hours sanding. They would move chairs into places June never intended. Someone would probably spill coffee on the upholstery within the first month. Eventually, most of them would stop noticing who designed it. That was fine. The room had never needed to remember us. I did. In my first life, I had thrown away June's note because I cared too much about how one moment looked to everyone else. This time, I had opened it. That one choice had not magically fixed my life. It did something better. It gave me a reason to make the next choice for myself. Stay in woodshop. Apply to design school. Let June speak for herself. Build beside her without deciding where she should go. And now, standing outside the room we had made together, I understood something my 30-year-old self never had. A good future wasn't the one with the safest blueprint. It was the one you were willing to revise when real life asked more of you. June tapped my shoulder. I turned. She pointed at the folded note still in my hand, then signed. Don't lose it. I slipped it carefully into the inside pocket of my jacket. Never again. June held out her hand. I took it. Then we walked away from room 214 together, carrying no finished plan for what came next. For once, I didn't need one. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and support us.